everyone online and in person with us here today. We want to welcome you to our Bhakti Brain Health Clinic Functional Forum of June 2025. We're so excited about our guest speaker tonight. I just want to tell you a little bit about her and introduce her. Laurie Hollinger is a business coach who helps visionary entrepreneurs solve the leadership and people challenges that quietly drain their energy and hold their businesses back. She brings more than 25 years of experience leading teams, first in category leading retail corporations, and later as director of business development at a fast-growing marketing and product agency. Over the years, she's worked across industries to tackle real business problems and help teams bring great ideas to life. Today, Laurie works with successful but stretched business owners who want to lead more wisely, build energized teams, and align their business with what really matters. She believes in asking better questions, paying success forward, and tapping human potential that's often just beneath the surface. So we are thrilled to have Laurie share with us tonight, and welcome Laurie Hollinger.
Challenging. All right. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for being. I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you, Fran and Guy, and everyone for the invitation to come and tell you a little bit about our personal story and my business story. So my talk is entitled Genius Untapped. There is genius in all of us, but too often it goes untapped. And when it does, it shows up in bad ways. We feel stress, we feel frustration, we feel disconnection, and it can show up maybe at work. Maybe you're in a role that really depletes you and leaves you with nothing left. Not because you're not capable, but maybe it's just because it's not aligned with your true genius. Or maybe it shows up at home, in families. It could be a child who just really can't find their place in the world. Or it could be a really promising young person who is struggling. And usually somewhere in there are parents who feel like they are doing everything that they can do, but it's just not enough. So I lived both of those realities. And we'll start with the business example. I'm a business coach. I work with leaders who have reached a certain level of success, but they're stuck. And they're usually stuck for one of two reasons. First of all, it's because what they've been doing is no longer working. Secondly, it's that they're doing too much. And for the business to effectively grow, they would have to do more. And there's no way they would be able to keep pace. So I'm also a mother. And that's the story that I want to start with tonight. 1 year ago, our son, who has a genius IQ, was failing school. And worse than that, he wanted to escape. He wanted to escape the noise he said he heard in his head. But before we go there, I think in order for you to really understand our story, I need to go back to the beginning. So our boy was always exceptional. To give you some idea, at the age of 2, we could open up the big book of presidents that we had at home, and he could name any one of them by sight. In his little raspy 2-year-old voice, he would be Calvin Coolidge, Warren Van Buren, Abraham Lincoln. As fast as we turned the pages, he could name the presidents. We didn't really know why, but it was a pretty cool party trick. And one day we were at daycare and we noticed there was a poster on the wall and it had the presidents. And his daycare provider said, "Oh yeah, he loves that. He asks us every day who those guys are." So we knew he had a great memory. And he also had an amazing vocabulary for someone his age, both in English and in Spanish. He was, and not only that, by the time he hit elementary school, he was writing short stories, and they were so good and they were so mature that I questioned him. I said, no, did you write this? Or did you maybe see it somewhere? And he's like, Mom, I wrote that. And I believe that he did. Now, he was in addition to his exceptional abilities, he could also be exceptionally disruptive. At daycare, he told very big, often untrue stories that got him into trouble. In elementary school, he was always pushing the limits, and we got a lot of calls. And at age 7, we got some answers. We learned that he indeed was exceptional. Not only was he once exceptional, he was twice exceptional. And that's what the psychologists called it. They said he has 2 different learning differences. The first was he had a very high IQ and he was gifted. And the second was that he had ADHD, which meant he was brilliant and he was bored. And he was amazingly creative and highly sensational. So it was quite the combination. And he was constantly exploring the things that he found interesting, which was seldom what was going on in class. We tried many, many things to curb that behavior at school. We tried gifted classes. Those didn't work. We tried talk therapy for an 8-year-old. A little bit hard. With a lot of urging and a lot of reluctance, we tried medication. And that had some really hard side effects. So there were, and then finally, when he was a preteen, we tried functional medicine. Forgot that one. Try getting someone on ADHD medication to eat a limited diet as an angsty preteen. It was almost impossible. Now, there were bright spots. His genius was there. It was trying to shine through. When he started junior high in the 6th grade, he got the lead in the class play, and he was amazing. He was on stage the whole thing. And we thought, maybe this is it. Maybe he just needs more challenges. And at that point is when we got the challenge that none of us wanted, COVID. At first I thought, well, maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe he is really just an online learner. And he's going to get his work done really fast, and his nervous system is going to have time to kind of recover and repair, and this is going to be great. It was a disaster. He disappeared into screens, just disappeared. It was either video games, or it was social media, or it was YouTube, but he got further away from us, more isolated, more withdrawn. And so we went back to therapy. And at that point, they said, be careful, be watchful. And we were like, well, what does that mean? Is he even going to make it to high school? He did. He made it to high school, but not before we looked at every kind of alternative school, charter school, private school that was out there, and we found one. We found one that he really liked. It would be a huge financial commitment. It would be a lot of drive time for us, but it didn't matter. We wanted him to be better. And so we got pretty far. We got to the final interview, and they called us up and they said, you don't need to come. So what? They said, we don't have the kind of resources it would take for someone as exceptional as your son. So, out of options, we went back to public school. And he really tried. He really, really wanted success. And he started out strong. Freshman year, sophomore year, he gave it his all. He would come home and he would be wiped out. It took all of his strength to be normal in that environment for 7 hours at a time. And finally, he just couldn't take it anymore. He just wanted escape. And it showed up as not going to class, being late for class. I lost track of the tardies once we passed the 200 mark. While other families were talking about ACT prep, we were trying to get through the day. And then it happened. I saw something on LinkedIn. I was scrolling through and it was a post and it was from a woman who said, we just got back from an amazing spring break vacation. It was peaceful, it was enjoyable, and it was the first one like that we'd had. She said that her son had behavioral issues and that they had discovered something called neurofeedback therapy that had really helped them out. And that their family was enjoying vacations. And I showed it to my husband and I said, what do you think? And he's like, I don't know. So he did some research and we called Bhakti Brain Health. We talked to Fran, we scheduled an intake. And when we got the results of that QEEG, we could see exactly what he had been talking about. All that noise in his head, it showed up as bright red marks on his brain scan. We learned that not only did he have dysregulated pathways, but that he took in stimulus and he didn't drop it the way the rest of us do. So he was walking around with layers and layers of information in his head all the time. So last summer, he did 40 neurofeedback sessions. And he wanted success as badly as we did. It was slow, but by fall, something had shifted. We didn't know exactly what it was, but we could feel it. He went back to school and this would be the test. And for the first time, there were no tardies. He came home tired at night, but he was talking about homework. And his grades were strong and they were holding. And then there came a moment I will never forget. He said, Mom, I'm going to need a ride home from school tonight, later though, because I'm trying out for the play. And I was like, okay, all right, you just tell me what time, I'll be there. And he said, and Mom, I love you. I hadn't heard that, but I've heard it a lot since. So not only did he go out for the play, he got a lead, and then he made friends, and then he and those friends made it to the state competition. He became a cautious and careful driver. He now has his driver's license. He said, Mom, maybe I think I'm ready for a part-time job. And so he got a part-time job, and still his grades held. This spring, he came to us and kind of blew our mind. He said, hey, Mom, Dad, I signed up for the volleyball team. We were like, really? Our twice exceptional boy was in a team sport. His vision expanded, and now he has a plan. he said, I didn't do so good in freshman and sophomore year, so I think I'm going to just use my senior year and do all PSEO college courses, and then I can just transfer into the school that I want to get into. So, neuromodulation feedback therapy, it was that miracle. It was that miracle I was praying for. And I just wanted to share that with you. So one of the things that I noticed as I watched our son's progression from struggling to creating this big vision for his life was that it was familiar to me. I'd seen it before. I'd seen it a lot in the work that I do every day. That I see these business owners who are struggling rediscover their genius. And I want to tell you a story about that. So about 16 months ago, I had a client who had a tech issue, and I was like, oh, I know exactly who to call. It was a fellow that he was a tech entrepreneur, and he was great. He was friendly, he was affable, he was so smart, and I always came away from those calls with so much more than I'd even asked. And so I was on the phone with him, and I started launching into my question from my client, and he's like, wait, what is it that you do exactly? And I said, oh, yeah, I don't think we've ever talked about it really. I said, I'm a business coach. I help people who are super successful but a little stuck grow, but in a way that's sustainable for the future so they can keep growing. And he paused for a minute and he said, yeah, I think I need your help. Or no, first of all, he asked me a funny question. At the time, it was a funny question. He goes, have you ever worked with anybody who had 7 companies? I said, no, I haven't, but I like a challenge. And then he said, I think I need your help. And so what I discovered over the next few months was that he too was someone with incredible gifts. He loved solving hard problems. He moved fast, he did excellent work, and he never quit until he had the solution and could see the result. He had a team of 8, and he had a few business owners or partners, and every day he was the center of it all. He was the hub. Every email, every Slack, every client call, every text message, it all ended with him. He was the bottleneck for his business, but he was also the engine. And there just wasn't any more of him to go around. But the worst part about it was he wanted to grow. And he knew he couldn't where he was at. So he really had the skills to solve every problem but his own. So we went to work. And the first thing we did was we used an assessment that is called the 6 Types of Working Genius. What it does is it gives words to your natural genius, to the places where you are naturally gifted, and doing those things gives you more energy. So it was not a surprise to me to find out that he's gifted in ideation and also in tenacity. He'd love to see things through to the end. Then we got to his frustrations. And he did admit that he doesn't like to spend a lot of time kind of in wonder, daydreaming, thinking about things. It's more action-oriented. And he loved his all-remote team that worked rather independently as long as he could keep giving them answers. So he really didn't have to galvanize or kind of do any cheerleading. The next thing we did is I had him I asked him to make a list of all of the things that he did and to put the things that frustrated him in a certain spot. And I said, now let's find somebody on your team who can do these things, but could do them faster, better, and quicker than you could ever do them. And so that's where we started delegating. And once he handed those things off, something amazing happened. He handed them off not to check a box, but to create space. And with that space in his brain, he was able to build a vision for every single one of his businesses. And suddenly, not everything was urgent. Some of those businesses would grow, some of those would be maintained, and some of those would be sold. And so once he was done with that, he moved on to his team. And he thought, wow, what's the genius of everybody on my team? And once he learned that, his expectations for them changed. He put them in places where they were doing the things that they were best at. And what that showed him was the gaps, where he needed to hire and where he needed to bring in talent to make his business work. So with more clarity, the team stepped up and they thrived. And he started using his own genius to do things like create video playbooks of new processes so the team could be self-taught in certain things. He created an org chart where the people on his team reported to each other instead of always reporting into him. And within the first few months, his business, the one that was maintained, was up 40%. As of where we are at this year, he will double his business. But this isn't just a story about business finance. This is a story about people understanding and living into their genius. And from a personal perspective, he hired a nutritionist because he was enjoying all this newfound energy. He thought, well, maybe I could feel even better. He took a couple of vacations, short ones, but he did it. And now he spends his weekends with family, cooking, or doing what he loves to do, which is tackling a really tough technical problem. He really went from near burnout to being an empire builder. So he's back in his genius, so is his team, and now growth feels easy because nobody is trying to do it all. So if there's one thing that I've learned over this past year, both as a coach and as a parent, it's this. Genius is not rare.
It's not what? Rare.
But tapping it does require courage and persistence. Sometimes it takes the courage to ask for help, to step back, to assess, and to question the way you've always done things. It takes courage to say, I want this to be easier. I don't want to struggle anymore. And it takes persistence. That's what carries you through the slow, steady work of real change. Because things don't change overnight. They shift. In my family, the turning point came when we heard about neurofeedback therapy. For others, it might be a coach, it might be a new org structure, or simply taking the time to reflect. But here's what I know. When you begin to tap into your genius, your true genius, something powerful happens. Your vision expands. You start to imagine a life where you do only that work that you're best at. Work feels lighter, momentum returns, and you find yourself dreaming again. And that's why I created a new course and it's called Design Your Decade. It's a 10-week guided experience with like-minded people who are ready to stop reacting and start intentionally designing their next chapter. We have space to reflect, we have space to find your genius, and we have space to cast your vision and some 3-year goals and a daily practice that keeps you on track. It's designed to feel like a reset or a reboot, and it's a fresh look from the mountaintop instead of in the weeds. And the next cohort begins at the end of this month. So if you're curious, I would love to share more about that. And you can find details on my website, hollingerco.com. And I'd also like to invite you to sign up for my Untapped newsletter. It's only a couple-minute read. It comes out every Friday, and you'll hear more stories, more tools, and more insights to help you be a better leader. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And thank you for being people who are here wanting to discover your genius.
Quite a touching story to hear you. Well, so we've lived through that story with you, but it was quite touching to hear you share that tonight. I can see how much it means to you. Yeah, so thank you for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about neurotherapy and what we do. Okay. So just a little bit about us, kind of our pedigree, who we've trained with. I always find it's helpful to share that. So you can understand a lot about clinicians, a clinic, based on who they've trained with, the systems that they use. It has everything to do with how we practice what we practice. So one of the questions that always comes up is there research? So I'd like to just knock that off right at the top. Yes, there are mountains of research for what we do. Here's an example of some of it. If we break it out into smaller categories, again, we can see that there's plenty of research. So this talks a little bit about kind of like a philosophy of practice. So many of us have been practicing under this kind of evidence-based paradigm that's been around for a couple of decades. I've been practicing long enough that I was practicing before evidence-based medicine was a thing, and then have been practicing since evidence-based medicine is a thing. And maybe I will practice long enough to see the end of that and into the next one, which I had no idea that was going to happen. But this idea of moving into a more of a mechanism-based approach. And we see this really happening more, like most things, kind of on the research and the academic side, and slowly working its way out from there into practice. And it's just to simply say that we want to understand how things work, and then understanding the mechanism, just apply the mechanism to whatever the process is, versus getting away from this idea of evidence-based, which is to say we're going to take one variable and we're going to try and prove that kind of mask the evidence to show that one variable is kind of the linchpin, that it does what we say. And what we're kind of coming to find out is like that was never true. Like the paradigm was never true, because we can't break down a human being and medicine into a single variable. We're always multivariable. And so it was an artificial frame to put on, and more they're just coming to see that that's the case. So, but a mechanism-based approach does not require it to be constrained down to a single variable. So it matches what actually happens better, and so the outcome is more useful to the practice. In this case, the practice of medicine. So one of the things that we want to talk about, kind of somewhat along this idea of a mechanism-based, is this idea of predictive processing. So the brain, as its core function, is predictive processing. Now, what I don't want to do is I don't want to sound like one of those people who talks about human beings as machines. We're not. Our machine replacements are coming. So that'll happen. Those will be machines, but we're not machines. So there's a lot of squishiness to us, right? We have a lot of software, not just hardware. And I absolutely want to respect that in the clinic. We respect that there's a lot to people. We're not machines. Yet it is helpful to take that perspective to understand mechanisms so that we can apply those to get outcomes that we want more and more reliably. So we can talk about it in an as-if way, but again, not ever to be confused with somebody who's kind of, a reductionist perspective. We still believe that people have minds and souls and all of that to go along with it. But this idea of predictive processing is to say that most of us believe we function as if that what I'm thinking, I am generating that. My perception of reality, I am the generator of that, as a conscious act. And what predictive processing tells us is that actually we have a whole bunch of priors, all of this experience that we've had throughout our life, that's running in the background, and that sensory information from the world is coming in, and in a kind of below conscious level, our brain is predicting what's going to happen, right? So your brain will be predicting the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth. Right, exactly, right? So your brain was already there, right? And that's how we actually meet the world, is what's more true is that we have an error processing system more than kind of a perceptive system, which is we're tracking the difference, the unanticipated difference between what our brain is thinking is going to happen and then what happens, right? And so the better our brain is functioning, the less and less error there is, right? So a lot of ways we talk about the brain is it's an error minimization instrument that is trying to get its prediction of the world to line up closer and closer with the world so there can be as close to no error prediction as possible, right? So that's what's actually happening in our brain. So we're going to hear a little bit about that, and we're actually going to try and make this like a little more interactive. We're going to try and bring some of these theories and ground them a little bit more in some experiential. So we're going to listen to a top neuroscientist talk a little bit about this. So she's going to kind of lay a groundwork, and then we're going to play some games.
Joining us today is Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. Lisa is among the top 1% most cited scientists in the world for her revolutionary research in psychology as well as neuroscience. She is a University Distinguished Professor of Psychology at Northeastern University, with appointments at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. She is also the Chief Science Officer for the Center of Law, Brain, and Behavior at Harvard University. Most people, your audience may be very aware of the fact that the brain is controlling the body. I think most people don't realize that, and actually a lot of scientists don't think that way. And I could give you many examples, which I find really amusing. But I think most people, the average person, thinks about their brain as important for thinking, for feeling, for seeing, like all the things that, we think make us special as creatures on this earth. And the things that our brain does very silently, the important part now. When everything's working properly, by controlling the system of our body. From an evolutionary standpoint, and also from an anatomical standpoint, this is your brain's most important job, is controlling the systems of your body to keep you alive and well. And the way that your brain does this, and the fact that your brain does this in the service of thinking and feeling and seeing, I think is it's a hard insight to grasp, because we don't experience our lives that way. We don't experience every hug that we get and every insult that we bear as having anything to do with the way that the brain is controlling the systems of the body. But in fact, that is your brain's most important job. And everything you think and feel and see is in the service, more or less, energetically, of that task.
the scientific evidence is what convinces me, really. And that's the following. Your brain is always sending predictions to your body to control your body, and your body is always sending sense data back to your brain, including nociceptive input. And whatever your brain doesn't predict. So your brain is really changing. A prediction really is your brain changing the firing of its own neurons in advance of receiving sense data. When it receives sense data from the body or from the world, if it's predicted that data, then the firing doesn't change. And in fact, all the sense data did was confirm the prediction. So nothing about the information from your body actually created that experience in that moment. It's really all in your brain. Even when there is tissue damage, right? So when there really is tissue damage in your body or impending tissue damage, your brain is starting to construct, to predict the experience of pain. And then the nociceptive input comes and confirms that prediction. That pain was still constructed in your brain, right? It was just confirmed by your body. As your body heals, hopefully your brain learns that information that it didn't predict to update its ability to predict in the future. But learning is metabolically expensive. It's one of the most expensive things your brain can do. Move your body and learn something new. And so if for whatever reason you are metabolically encumbered, your brain will learn less well. And one way to think about chronic pain is that it's real. I mean, no one is saying, I mean, everything you experience is in your brain. What you see is in your brain. It's not in your eyes. What you hear is in your brain. It's not in your ears. If you pinch yourself, that pinch that you feel is not on your skin. You're feeling it in your brain. Everything you feel is in your brain. Your brain is constructing everything you feel. But when things go on in your body or in the world that are not predicted, your brain has an opportunity to learn that new information and update its predictions.
Okay. Packed a lot in there. So one of the things that I like to talk about is one of the things we overlook in the world of kind of neurofeedback, neurostimulation, is we can spend a lot of time thinking about the brain as an organ that thinks. And we miss that its biggest job is running the body, right? So when we have dysregulation in the brain, it isn't just that it affects our behavior or it affects our cognition. Maybe we're not very good at reading or comprehension or math, those kinds of things. It's also running our digestion and our thermal regulation and our blood sugar and our hormones and you name it, right? So dysregulation in the brain is going to have a broad cascading effect across the whole body. And then, as she said, that information from the body is being fed back up into the brain. So we have this information loop, right? And if there's dysregulation, then we're going to have disinformation, and that's going to affect the ability of the mechanism to be accurate on predictive processing. So we're going to do a little experiment here, and hopefully, if all goes well, I think it will, you're going to have a chance to see, like, what's it like when your brain doesn't do its job? Like, what happens when your brain is giving you wrong information, right? So let's see how that goes.
Even though your brain is more remarkable than the most powerful computer in the world, it is possible to trick that very brain of yours. Have a look at this. What can you see? Oh, you say that's easy. I can see a window going around. Is it rotating or no? It paused. Now it's going the other way. Okay, so we're watching a window that's going backwards and forwards. Pauses again. Now it goes back the other way. Backwards and forwards all the time, oscillating. Are you sure that's what you're seeing? In fact, you're looking at an optical illusion that was invented by Albert Ames back in 1951, and it's quite a remarkable illusion. If we stop the window now, you'll notice that it was rotating the same direction all the time on a turntable. Same way all the time, but it isn't a rectangle. You assumed that it was a window, so it must be a rectangle. Oh, no, it isn't. Look at that end there, quite short. This end, quite large. In fact, it's a trapezoid. A trapezoid, a strange shape. not a rectangle though. But because we've seen so many windows in our lives, we assume that they're all rectangular. And you can see that I've painted this window on a flat piece of cardboard to look like a real window. In fact, I've painted the cross pieces so that they appear to be three-dimensional. I've even painted in the shadows that you might get if you had a light from above. Okay, now you know it's an illusion. You know it's not a window, it's a flat piece of cardboard. You also know that it's a trapezoid, it's not a rectangle. So now the illusion won't work with you, will it? Or will it? Have a look at it again. Well, this really is quite crazy, isn't it? We know all about the illusion now. It shouldn't work on us, and yet it still does. We still see the window going backwards and forwards. Look at that. It's appearing to pause now, and now change direction and go back the other way. Even though we know, because we've seen...
Is everybody seeing that? It looks like it's kind of going back and forth. Is there anybody who's sees it going around in a circle? You're seeing it go around in a circle? You don't see it going back and forth. Okay. So
seen it on the turntable, we know that it's rotating in the same direction all the time. Well, I think the problem is we don't
you watch
have a
here,
reference point. What
you
we
see
need to do
that this is turning,
window, so we'll stop
but
it
at the
now
same time,
and
your
attach
brain
a
is showing you that
matchbox
it's
to one
going
end.
back and
We'll
forth.
attach it to the short end here with a paper clip. And then all you need to do is to watch that matchbox and use that as your point of reference. So this time, the illusion won't trick you. Or will it? Watch this. Now there's the matchbox going around the back of the window. Keep watching it. Now look what happens. The window appears to pause and go backwards, but the matchbox keeps coming and floats out past this edge of the window and rejoins the other edge of the window. Watch it again. Goes around the back. Firmly attached to the window, you can see that. But here's the crazy part. The window appears to stop, to pause, and then go backwards, but the matchbox just keeps on coming, floating through space. I think maybe the problem is we have our reference point attached to the window. Let's stop it. Take the matchbox off, and this time put on a reference point through the center of the window. What I'll use is a ruler, wooden ruler, can't bend, and I'll attach it right to the center of the window in this position here. Now this time you watch the ruler. You know it can't bend, so this time I'm sure we will defeat the illusion. What do you think? Here we go. Now there's the window, rotating. So is the ruler. It's attached to the window. But what's happening here? The window's going backwards, the ruler's still coming, and now it goes somehow or other through the window itself. Really crazy. Window pauses again, ruler keeps coming. Ruler's attached to the window, you can see that. You can even see the pin. But watch what happens here. The ruler's coming, window pauses, window goes backwards, and somehow or other they go through each other, even though you know they can't do it. What a crazy illusion Adelbert Ames invented, because we're so used to seeing windows which are rectangular. If the same illusion is taken to a tribe in the middle of Africa where they haven't seen rectangular windows, it doesn't work for them. They see it rotating around and around and around, whereas we see it going backwards and forwards all the time.
So I think that's all great, and there's modern versions of this, but I picked this guy just because I thought it would be kind of retro and fun and laugh at him. But the thing he says at the end, I think, is one of the most amazing parts of this, which is if you take people who don't live in modern civilized world, like in a modern built environment, that doesn't work on them, right? So it is again our priors, right? And in this case, the priors are just our lived environment. The fact that we live in environments that have square edges and rectangles all over the place, and our brain has just mapped that out as how reality is. So then you show our brain this, and even though he's telling you what's not happening, your brain is like, nope, I know what's going on. I am 100% convinced. And again, if you're watching the little mount rotating, you can see it rotating. And so you know it's going 360 degrees, and yet the thing attached to it looks like it's going back and forth. And you're seeing two realities at the same time, but you're utterly convinced that what you see is happening, right? So that's what happens in our brains, right? When we have dysregulation and we're getting misinformation, we're utterly convinced that what's happening is the case. But just like that, you can be fooled by a piece of paper. You can be fooled by reality, right? It's even more convincing. So this is just an example of a measure that we do called microstate dynamics, which has to do with how we stitch together reality. So how our brain every few milliseconds is taking chunks of information and knitting them together. And so in this case, what we see, so our little legend is down here. So we have, this is on the cool side, so deficient. So the amount of, or the quality of information that this brain is producing as it moves through these microstates is a low quality of information. There's less information being
Yes.
unreliable processing. So it gives us a way to kind of when looking at a QEEG data to see how well is a brain stitching together reality to have an accurate perception. Gives us a little window into that. So we're going to do another one here. So I don't want you to shout out the answer so that we spoil this for anybody else in the room. But as we go through a series of pictures, what we're doing here is predictive processing, right? So at what point, with how much information, is your brain able to register the image that's going to be on the screen? Okay, so that's what you're looking for. So when you know what it is, just jot it down or make a mental note of what slide number your brain was able to pull out the image. Yeah? And that's as far as we go. I take it that if you can't get it from here, there's a bigger problem. So now let's just go back for a moment. So now that you know, right, might you be able to pick it up sooner? Right? So now we're talking about, this is the prior, right? So now you've gone through it, you have prior experience. So now your pattern recognition, the predictive processing, could work better. You might pick up cues here that the first time through you didn't pick up, right? Like one of the cues is the center image. It's easier to see the center image as a maple leaf. Once you know it's a maple leaf, you be like, oh yeah, so at least one frame, if not 2 frames earlier, you can pick it up. Whereas before, going through, unlikely, right? That if you don't have a good sense of what it is. So this is predictive processing, right? And the ability of your brain to pull that information out of the noise, that's what we do all day long, right? Signal, noise, the world coming to our brain, and our brain's ability to pull the signal out of the noise, that's what its job is, right? And so, yeah, go ahead.
So we're going to spend some time, we've been talking, Laurie talked a lot about this idea of untapped genius. We kind of think of it as like human flourishing, right? That idea of somebody reaching their full potential in life, being able to flourish in their life. So thought it would be fun to talk with you about what we actually do in the clinic in regards to neurotherapy and neuroimaging that for us helps people facilitate people's flourishing. So we're going to do this through the story that Kirsty has shared with us. So this is Kirsty. She's a client of ours, and you're going to hear Kirsty talking and very little of me talking, because what she says is more powerful and just really, I think, gets to the core of what we do and what the value of neurotherapy is in regards to human flourishing. So Kirsty came to us. She's a woman in her mid-30s, professional woman, very successful, and ended up having some events in her life that started to kind of take her into a darker spot, a more difficult spot, and she was struggling. She'll talk a little bit about that in the video, but kind of the what of it doesn't really matter. The idea is that she, like all of us, bump into things in life that can kind of catch you off guard, send you down the road in a way that you didn't plan on going. So when she came to us, she was kind of very much like what Laurie was talking about with her son. She's sort of at the end for herself. She was feeling like, I don't know if I belong here because I don't seem to be able to function here. So we spent some time. One of the things we do when people come to us is we start out doing a brain mapping, so a quantitative EEG. We're going to record their EEG to find out what's working right, but also where that dysregulation that Guy was talking about might be. And so these are literally just a few images from the data that we gathered about Kirsty and what was going on with Kirsty's brain that might help us to start understand what was happening in her life and what she was experiencing. In some ways, we kind of don't care about the symptoms in the brain health clinic. This is what we care about, is what's happening in the brain, because what we realize is that as we work on regulating the dysregulation in the brain, we know that kind of up the chain, that's going to result in symptom reduction, if you're talking from that deficient standpoint, or just more human flourishing, right? And so Kirsty had a lot of things going on, and she'll talk with you in a minute about that. But this just gives you an idea where she was struggling. She had areas of her brain where she had difficulty integrating her emotional and cognitive information. Her cingulate was pretty dysregulated. She had definitely had indications of attention problems. She came in with a diagnosis of ADHD as well. Had a lot of struggle with working memory, her executive functioning was lacking. Extreme fatigue, no stamina, difficulty processing emotion, tons and tons of anxiety that she had going on, panic, nightmares, those kinds of things. So she was kind of at a point where she, from her report, she was a mess. That was the word she used to me when I did the consult. She said, I don't know if I'm going to be the right person for your clinic. I'm a mess, right? And so I said, yep, we like you. Come this way. We're all about that. So I'm going to let Kirsty talk with you, but really the idea here is that like the superpower of neurotherapy is really this idea of us being able to leverage the brain's natural ability to reorganize and adapt. And that ties right in with what Guy was talking about, being able to kind of take those predictions and be able to start considering other possibilities. So Kirsty, I'm going to share in the next several slides some video clips of Kirsty talking about her experience.
Definitely an easy question. When I first started therapy, I didn't really know exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know how I would feel. So at that point in my life, I was very averse to anything else that was going to hurt or that would be scary or intimidating. And I was experiencing a lot of dissociating and shutdown and numbness. And I had existed in a numb, powered down state because I had just gotten used to life had just become so difficult that I really powered down to survive, and then existing in a sort of dissociative state, it can almost get addictive. And I started to learn about myself and start to believe that I had resiliency that I had sort of long forgotten. And that was one of the first things that I noticed, is that I started to feel hopeful again, that I would be able to withstand the pressures and stresses. And I really started to feel more present in life. And it's not like there was a significant life change or situation change necessarily, but I started to feel like I could handle it. And part of that, I think, was just the experience with going in for the neuro stimulation and neurofeedback. I didn't exactly know what was happening, but I just fully trusted the process. And it was sort of slow at first because the my brain was just so tired all the time that even some of the sessions were hard to sit through, not because they were painful, but because my stamina. But then I started to feel more and more stamina. And then through that, really started to get accustomed to when my brain was starting to feel stressed and would want to shut down, or felt so overwhelmed that I started to believe that there was no way I was going to be able to get through whatever stress was coming at me. And so that process of going from wanting to avoid anything that was going to stress me out or give me anxiety, or, I mean, I just was so anxious for so long, and that anxiety really made me depressed. But one of the first things that I started to experience was just a sense of trust and calm, and really being present in the moment. That focused concentration of the sessions sort of trained me to be able to stay present and to stay focused and to work through whatever my brain was trying to compute. So it was pretty drastic, and just continued more and more and more through the set. Definitely an easy question. When I first started therapy, I didn't really.
So I'm going to cut it off there because I didn't crunch the video enough, and you don't need to listen to me on a video for sure. So this is a nice foreshadowing of what Kirsty was going to experience as she continued to go through her neurotherapy. So after we did her analysis and talked with her about what recommendations were, we decided that we would start with some neurostimulation. She had a ton of anxiety. She was really fatigued. So we wanted to kind of give her brain sort of a bit of a jump start to see if we could kind of calm it a bit and get it prepped and ready for the neurofeedback that she would then do. You heard her talk about the fatigue in her brain. And so when you do neurofeedback, it is fatiguing. And so she had a real concern about whether or not she would actually be able to be successful with this. And so we said, let's start here with some stim. Let's see what we can do to kind of get you going in the right direction. So we have different types of neurostimulation that we do in the clinic. We did the top one with Kirsty, where we were doing some alternating current stimulation with her. We also did the pulsed electromagnetic field stimulation. That's what you see in the picture on the top, and the picture of the little girl hugging her little stuffy while she's getting some neurostimulation done. And so I'm going to flip to another clip and have you listen to what Kirsty started to talk about when she was about 8 sessions into neurostimulation.
Both. It had been such a long time. I had existed not present for such a long stretch, like the entirety of my adult life and a lot of my childhood. There's been times where I felt completely myself. I mean, that sounds like I've been faking my life, and that's not it, but felt calm and secure to be just completely present in the moment and not worrying about everything that's going on and what's going to be coming next. Like, just really, truly present and enjoying the moment and riding the ups and downs. So part of it was new, and then part of it was sort of this, I don't know, old friend, just comfort that was familiar but also new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It almost sounds so. What I didn't share with you about her is that one of the events that had really shaken her is cancer. And so when she was working with us, was in the process of getting treated for cancer. And it was extremely difficult for her. And at the same time, it started to bring up all kinds of stuff, right, that came from some childhood. And so she was filled with all of this anxiety. As we did the stimulation, she started to calm, and her system was able to just really, like she told you, settle into kind of being present here as opposed to everywhere else that was happening in her brain, right? And as she was able to do that, she was able to ground herself enough to really start engaging in her life in some ways that she had not been able to do for some time. So once we were done with the neurostimulation, we had her at this place where her anxiety had calmed enough. We moved on to neurofeedback. So neurofeedback is a learning paradigm. So we're teaching her brain how to behave differently for the long run. And this is the real power of neurofeedback, is that idea of tapping into the brain's ability to regulate itself, right? You just let it figure out what it needs to do, give it a little guidance, and away it goes. So as we continued to do the neurofeedback, this is what Kirsty
bit about the impact that had on that sense of fatigue.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest realizations during my treatment, was how much of my life had been genuinely fueled by anxiety or worry and sort of wanting to avoid pain and chaos and stress. So the moment I would wake up, I would get this flood of anxiety about everything that could go wrong, or feeling like I had messed up, or that was in my basket to fix for the day or for the future. And that jump that comes from wanting to make sure that I do everything I can to prevent the ball from dropping, or negative impact either on myself, but a lot of it was for those around me that I cared about. That stress fueled this anxious energy, and I lived off of that. And I think I thought that was normal for a long time, for most of my life. And I didn't realize that I was pulling from a tank that felt like it was an endless supply of anxious energy, but then that tank got depleted. And then there was this stress of, okay, there's nothing in the tank to pull from. How am I going to function if I don't have that? And I started to learn that stress and that chaotic, anxious energy was not actually energy. It was like short, unhealthy. It wasn't a good energy. And when I stopped repeating those same patterns and relying on that anxiety, I became very, very tired. And then I was in an unfamiliar zone. I had to relearn life and relearn myself. And that was very scary. And previously, when I had tried to do that and live a healthier pattern life, not fueled by anxiety and stress and chaos, I felt lost and alone. I didn't know what to do, and that became very scary. And that's when I really started to.
So the thing I wanted to say about that is, you heard Kirsty say that she had been trying to do that in the past, right? It's not like she had not been trying strategies to try and manage life differently, but that she felt like she just couldn't do it. This is the superpower of neurotherapy, right? Where when that brain is dysregulated and you ask it to do the tasks of managing anxiety, thinking clearly, decision making, it's like asking it to do something that it doesn't have any capacity to do. It's like, if I had a broken foot and you asked me to run a race, it'd be a silly request, right? I would not be able to do that until my foot got healed. This is, I think, Kirsty, what she's describing here is exactly what starts to happen with neurotherapy, is that idea of, as the brain starts to regulate. So we were working mostly, when we did neurofeedback, we were training her default mode and her salience networks. Those two networks were pretty dysregulated and contributed significantly to what she was reporting as symptoms, right? And as we started to regulate those networks, and we were able to be pretty successful with that, her brain was able to do the things she was asking it to do. It's not like suddenly there was this big aha, oh, I need to do it this way. It was just that it became easier for her to do because her brain had that capacity now to do that, or the ability to do it. So let me.
My sharpness, like my mental acuity has returned a lot. Like I don't forget things as much as I used to because I'm not in hyperdrive all the time. If, for example, if I needed to remember to bring my water bottle, I would have to say water bottle, water bottle, water bottle over and over to kind of get it to stick. And then I would have to stick it in the middle of the floor so it was very obvious so I wouldn't forget it, because my brain was just so overactive with everything. And it's not that everything inside of my head was bad or dark. It was just so much all the time. And I would get just inside of my head was like a tsunami at any given time of good things too. But just so much going on. Now I have the ability to choose a lot better what I'm thinking about, what I'm ruminating on, what's sort of an active thought and what's much more passive. I don't have the stress of forgetting things because I have the trust that I'm going to remember. And that's been amazing, just with work and life and feeling like I'm reliable too. I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame for forgetting things or being late or just feeling like I wasn't adept at life because I consistently forgot things. I would make up for them, and I think I carried guilt that I didn't need to. They were small transgressions, if you will, but they seemed so significant.
So that idea of this, like she talks about recall and memory was, she was struggling a lot with working memory. This idea of the sharpened mental acuity, right, was really significant for her. It was one of the things that she had just sort of completely lost, right? She had lost her sharpness. She couldn't think very clearly. And to gain that back, she was able to start being in relationships in a very different way. And she talks about, I don't know that I have it in one of these clips, but she talks about how the impact of neurotherapy was like, she talks about the impact on her, the positive impact, but also the effect that had on her family because of her ability to be able to interact with them, even though it was dysfunctional family dynamics, right? That she was able to have emotion regulation, mental clarity to be able to interact with them in a way that was healthy for her, but then also for them in general. And so all kinds of like, this isn't what she came in asking for help with, right? She came in because she was a mess and she had ADHD, right? And this is what happens as you start regulating the brain, as we start seeing some of those more positive impacts. So neurostimulation, neurofeedback, audio-visual entrainment. This is a neuromodulation that we utilize in clinic, and we have, I bet 3/4 of our clients are using this device at home while they're supplementing their training. Many of them are using them either long after they're gone from us, or maybe they've never come into the clinic to see us and are using an audio-visual entrainment device. This is a device that allows you, it kind of modulates the brain, and it really, what it's really doing is using light and sound stimulation to get the brain to kind of produce like a frequency, a brainwave frequency, and kind of get the brain into a particular state. And so it might be that we're looking at using it for anxiety. It might be that we're looking at using it for focus, for ADHD, two things that Allie had a lot of struggle with. She's going to talk with you in a little bit about sleep as well. This is a wonderful device to use for sleep. And so a way of kind of treating the brain, training it on a regular basis to be performing as optimally as possible kind of daily. So I'll let Kirsty tell you.
Healing work that I did allowed me to feel comfortable with the assessments that I would be doing of whether or not this situation here and now is safe and secure. And in my relationships, I've just really settled down and calmed down and have gotten good rest. I don't wake up 4 or 5 times during the night. I'm like literal nightmares. I would wake up and my heart would be beating so fast. and I would be disoriented, almost like I was in like a pixelated state, trying to figure out reality, so scared. And I was finally able to let go of those traumatic things as much as I can. I don't think we ever let go fully, but to the point where it affects me less and less and less. And instead of every night being 2 or 3 hours of sleep, instead of every night waking up in a panic, now it's just a handful of nights each month. And that just being able to rest, to be really able to just rest and work on the relationships in my life, to accept that I can trust them, to accept that they are safe, or accept that I will be okay if they're not, has also been just so transformational.
So I have to say something. Sometimes when I listen to this Kirsty talking about her experience, like what she just said there is, as a therapist, if I'm doing psychotherapy, like this is what I want, that I so often can't, facilitate in a therapeutic setting. And this is, again, I think a superpower of neurotherapy is that it can allow somebody to get like that whole well-being. I was talking about that sense of like the brain, impacting the body and sleep and those sorts of things. And this is just a lovely example of how, like I think about Kirsty, and I think about like the little potpourri of things that we provide for people. It's more than potpourri, but like we have a lot of different options, right? And this is just a wonderful example of how, when you are utilizing all that you can in terms of neuromodulation, neurotherapies, the kinds of flourishing that can happen as a result of it.
Okay.
Healing. I think another thing too is things feel so much less permanent. I felt like I was stuck in this judgment sentence that was forever, and it was forever hard and overwhelming, and I was forever incompetent and broken and trapped. And I feel like I can breathe again. Ironic because I'm sick right now, but I really feel so much more peace in my life and so much more hope and productive, and just like I have progress now, where I just felt so chained, so stuck, and so sentenced forever. It doesn't feel like that. I feel like I feel creative again too. Like I missed that spark of excitement and joy, and that was a hallmark of me prior to getting into that state of dysfunction and paralysis. I just feel a spark again, and I wake up in the morning, and rather than being what felt like I got injected like directly into my veins was ice. It felt like a full ice takeover of stress and anxiety. I wake up now and I'm like, okay, well, today's gonna maybe be challenging, but let's do it. And it just, I don't know, I feel again sort of like a new person, but also that familiarity of the good parts of me that kind of got stuck.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to hear.
I think another thing.
Okay. So I think that's Kirsty gives us her story as a way of really like describing what it is that neurotherapy can do to enhance somebody's flourishing in life. And so as we kind of end our presentation tonight, for you to kind of hold in mind what you heard Laurie talking about in terms of the story she shared about her son and how he is flourishing, and then to keep in mind what Kirsty has told you about where she came from, this place of feeling like she was just a mess and not sure. She literally says, I'm not sure I belong in this world, right? to this place where she gets up in the morning and she can look at the morning and go, okay, well, ooh, I got this going on today. Could be tough, but let's get it. Let's go for it, right? That idea of kind of tapping into her brain's capacity. I mean, we didn't put anything in her brain. We didn't do any, we just facilitated her brain being able to heal and regulate so that it could continue to flourish in the way that Kirsty and Laurie's son and everybody else is able to do. Questions, happy to answer any questions you might have. Sure. Yeah, it's kind of the difference between treatment paradigm and a learning paradigm, right? So the device is more of a treatment paradigm. However, like, you know, so you use it kind of to sort of treat a symptom, focus issue, anxiety, sleep issue, that kind of thing. But if you think about it, if you're using that device on a daily basis, maybe 1 or 2 times a day, every day, day after day after day, your brain, the neuroplasticity in your brain is going to pick it up, right? And so over time, it can do that piece. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you in the room, all of you online. We will plan on seeing you next month.